So I've been thinking about what it means to understand, what it means to understand anything, and what it means to misunderstand. And this question has, emerged for me many times in the past, but usually it's provoked by a disagreement or a misunderstanding that I will get into with another blogger or a vlogger on the internet. Like, what happens when arguments and debates emerge between warring factions and some sort of um, a rhetorical battle? How do we end up there, right? I mean, and I think we end up there by misunderstanding one another. And in some ways, there's something about communication itself that is violent, right? Just think about the word itself. Munition is in there, right? Ammunition. So there's this sort of war scenario that we imagine whenever we think about what it means to communicate with one another. And it's very important, I think, to acknowledge contradiction whenever we engage in conversation. So there is that argumentative dimension to it, but for conversation to really be able to continue, in a viable way, in a way that enhances our understanding rather than diminishes it, I think all of the contradictions that emerge, all of the arguments that begin to develop should be understood as serving a truth that neither party could possess of their own accord, right? It's not as though understanding is something we do in an autonomous, individual way. Understanding, I think, always happens. It's a shared event, and in some sense, the recognition of truth is a shared event. It's not truth isn't the possession of an individual thinker, a Cartesian mind, a knower. Truth is something shared. It's intersubjective, and I think in terms of the history of philosophy, this transition from subjectivity as the condition for the possibility of experience of objects, as which Kant really articulated in a powerful way in the 20th century with Husserl and phenomenology. All of a sudden, it's not subjectivity that's the transcendental condition for the world as we experience it. It's intersubjectivity, right? So it's the social imaginary then. Well, if you take Husserl a step further into sociology, then it's the condition for the possibility of experience as a human being is sociality, is intersubjectivity. But I think we can go even further than Husserl here and say that truth is not just an event shared between human beings. Truth is something that, what science calls nature. The truth is something that nature itself participates in. And when human societies engage in scientific inquiries trying to understand nature, they are creating sort of intersubjective maps or systems of reference that lead you back to that underlying experience of connection with nature, with a sort of autonomously existing, growing, developing world. And so this would be something like what Bruno Latour, the sociologist of science and philosopher, this is, I think, what he's trying to do, where he's trying to break down this dichotomy between nature and society and say that what there are reality is fundamentally an organic affair where you have an ecosystem of different agencies transacting and interacting with one another in a network. So it's ecology as ontology, I think, is basically what Husserl is doing, so that it's no longer just human society that creates the conditions for the possibility of reality. It's the community of life on Earth, the community of life in our solar system and galaxy, where, from Latour's perspective, drawing on Alfred North Whitehead's ontology, even atoms are already organic beings. They're emergent unities. There are subatomic particles, right, that, just like the organelles of our animal cells, had to form symbiotic relationships with one another in order to endure and persist in the way that they do. So I think when we step into an ecological ontology, we realize that nature is not a machine and human beings are not sort of deluded ghosts in machines, but rather the human being is one member of a much larger society of non-human agencies and intelligences. Some of them live on Earth, some of them live in the sky, that where human beings are in a relationship with this larger cosmopolitical adventure, really. I think the evolutionary trajectory of our universe is astounding, and we are beginning to understand it more and more, but that understanding of the universe has to be woven back in with an understanding of how the human being is related to it, fundamentally derivative from it. So, there's an anthropic principle underlying this cosmology that people like Alfred North Whitehead tried to give us the bare outlines of and traces for. Whitehead called it a cosmological scheme. It's not a system in the sense that it's finished and complete and provides us with an answer to every question we might ask. Whitehead acknowledged what he called the fallacy of the complete dictionary. There can be no complete system. Whitehead should know this, of all people. He and Russell, in the Principia Mathematica, tried to produce a complete and internally consistent system, and Gödel proved that was impossible. So Whitehead is not trying to create a complete system. He's trying to provide a scheme, a sort of a philosophical poem that helps reorient our attention so that we can learn to pay attention to what we have forgotten about, namely, the larger community of life within which we are embedded. Whitehead's trying to direct our attention back to the values of the ecosystems within which we're embedded, because we've become totally obsessed with the values of the symbolic money system and other cultural systems that we've invented. We've misplaced concreteness onto these cultural abstractions and lost experiential contact with all of the other values circulating within and among us and all around us. So I think with Whitehead, philosophy is not an attempt to provide some sort of rational explanation for what there is. That's not what ontology means for him. As a process ontologist, that's an interesting word, actually. I like that. But trying to think being as process is really trying to think being as becoming. And so we're no longer looking for some final completed system. We're looking for a way of taking life seriously, so as to be able to live better. For Whitehead, reason, if we're going to still use that word to describe our highest value, then reason is really more about imagination and aesthetics and wisdom. It's about knowing how to live in a practical way with the larger habitat within which you exist. So I think it embeds thinking and embeds understanding in experience itself, rather than looking for the condition for the possibility of experience. Whitehead acknowledges that experience must be given, and all of our abstractions and our sense of what is possible emerges from that givenness, the givenness of experience. And, of course, he does also try to describe in the most general possible way what experience is, what it is, what it's doing, how experience becomes, how it grows. So he offers us a description, right? Not a sort of demonstration, a logical proof, but a description, a painting, a poem that is supposed to work as a sort of alchemical agent or psychedelic drug. That when you read Whitehead's work, like Process in Reality, the point is not to be convinced of his arguments, but to find your experience of being an embodied mind altered by his descriptions of experience, such that you are reoriented and come to see your experience as entirely other than it had been before. So think of reading Whitehead or any philosophy really as a pharmacological act. It's a consciousness-altering endeavor. So it's dangerous. Thinking is very dangerous. It never leaves us the way it found us. Anyways, thanks for listening. I don't know if I understand any better, but hopefully it was fun for you.